Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has signed into law the establishment of the National Center for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons. Now, this center aims to combat the proliferation of illegal weapons in Nigeria and West Africa. The center has already achieved notable successes, recovering over 3,000 illegal guns and 26,000 rounds of ammunition. Now, its efforts are guided by international frameworks that prioritize the protection of women and children from conflict. The center's next step will be an arms destruction exercise to permanently remove these weapons from circulation, further enhancing Nigeria's security. Joining us this evening on The Conversation to discuss more on this is Darlington Umaru, former consultant, Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons. Good evening, Darlington. Thank you so much for joining us at this time.
Good evening. My pleasure being here.
All right, Darlington, we know how much, Nigeria has suffered from insecurity, in the past years, even presently. Now, how would you say that this National Center for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons aligns with Nigeria's national security objectives?
Could you take that question again, please?
So I was saying that, we know how much we've suffered from insecurity in the past years, and also presently we're still suffering from that insecurity. So I'd actually like for you to tell us how you feel that the National Center for the Control of Small Arms and Light Weapons aligns with Nigeria's national security objectives.
Well, of course, you understand that the setting up of the center, it's in uniformity with the UN's and the ECOWAS treaties. Well, in other parts of the world, it's actually called NATCOM. But in Nigeria, since the administration of Buhari, it was changed to the Center for the Control of the Proliferation of Small Arms and Light Weapons. Before now, what we have had are committees that were set up by the presidency that were only at the mercy of the presidency, talking about funding and all of that. The center actually took over from the Presscom. The Presscom also took over from NATCOM before now. And the best practices have been that countries set up NATCOM to take control of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. But when the Buhari administration came, they transformed from Presscom to the center, even so not backed by law, which meant that they hadn't budgets of their own to run the activities of the body. But to the glory of God, Presscom took this matter to the National Assembly, where they requested for what the UN had prescribed, which is actually the NATCOM, like we have in other countries. Aside from Gambia and Nigeria, other countries in Africa had complied. But Gambia, I cannot say for now whether they have actually also complied, but to the glory of God, Nigeria is bearing a center and not NATCOM. But well, even so, it means that now that the bill has been signed to law, it meant that budgets will be allocated to the center to do their jobs. Talking about proliferation of small arms and light weapons, it's a global phenomenon, and it affects a lot of countries across the world. Today, insecurity in Nigeria is largely being fueled by the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. The objectives of the body, well, will have to comply with ECOWAS treaty and, what you call, what the UN have also prescribed. For now, no, we've not been able to see what that law contains until we see it, whether there are differentials. Of course, the name now is different from what we have in other countries across Africa and the world.
Okay, now what role, Darlington, what role will regional organizations, so do you think that regional organizations like the ECOWAS play in supporting, efforts to combat small arms trafficking within the region, talking about West Africa?
It's about the ECOWAS over time, they have sponsored activities to curb or take out weapons in the country. In other countries that are also under ECOWAS, there are programs provided by and sponsored by ECOWAS, EU, UN, and the rest of them that help mop up small arms and light weapons from the society. Of course, you know that one of the basic things we are suffering now on the continent of Africa and Nigeria specifically is the gross presence of illicit firearms in the country. You want to look at, we are talking about firearms in the hands of the non-state actors per se, that far outweighs firearms and ammunition in the hands of the of the state actors. Talking about those who are legally supposed to bear these weapons. But ECOWAS is one of the regulators in Africa, in the sub-region, for instance, where these small arms are recovered and what to be done with them. There are treaties, and these treaties, countries who have joined in these treaties, they align, and the sub-regional body also is in control of what you do with these weapons and control and all of that. But the question you want to ask again is, even with the presence of ECOWAS, how much have they been able to do to stop the movement of illicit arms into some of these countries? I for one, have discovered that the ECOWAS Treaty of Free Movement has also helped to, this movement of illicit arms from one country, particularly from the Sahel region into Nigeria to fuel terrorism and what you call banditry today. But otherwise, there are programs that ECOWAS in itself is supposed to run in this country, member countries that belong to ECOWAS to help curb illicit movement of these small arms and light weapons. But again, have they really worked? The answer, because of this free movement of nomads, for instance, from among West African countries, and even humans from West African countries, the porous borders have also encouraged the movement of these persons through those places and moving these illicit weapons to most of these countries, and that black market trade has been fueled so much. So how much has ECOWAS been able to do? Well, ECOWAS has been able to regulate the purchase of arms by ECOWAS member countries from factories across Europe, America, Asia, and all of that. Because before, for instance, Nigeria can purchase weapons, talking about the state actors now, they must first write to ECOWAS. And that ECOWAS will publish such a letter for a number of months, and thereafter, until ECOWAS issues such countries what is called certificate of I'll remember now. There's a certificate ECOWAS will need to issue to you as a country, which will not give you clearance that you must present to the factories abroad before they can deal with you in the trade of those weapons.
Okay, Darlington,
aside from that,
you said ECOWAS hasn't really done as much as they should when it comes to movement of arms and ammunition. But what about the international... Illegally. All right, so what about the international frameworks? And I'm talking about UN Security Council, and all that. Have they been effective in addressing small arms trafficking as well?
Well, on paper, yes. because there are rules and there are guides, and they've been able to sponsor activities that has to do with training, educating the security agents and the military, even the paramilitary bodies like customs and all of that, on how to achieve success in terms of curbing the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. But even so, the porosity of borders across most of this country, Nigeria, for instance, is bordered by 4 countries: Niger, Republic of Benin, Cameroon, and Chad. And within this region, don't forget that wars in Africa have fueled the movement of these illicit weapons through the Sahel. For instance, the fall of Libya helped a lot of movement of small arms and light weapons across the Sahel down to Nigeria through the Sahel region. Of course, when we talk about the Sahel region, we are talking about borders on the northern part of Nigeria. And so, well, on paper, UN has done its bit, but practically, why do we still have so much of these illicit weapons circulating in Nigeria? If you want to talk about achievements, now in the era of Prescom, a lot of weapons were recovered starting from the Niger Delta and then down to southeast, and then down to the north. And most of these weapons were destroyed. But even so, the production of these small arms and light weapons by blacksmiths, who is checkmating their activities. Now, to the glory of God, the center has come on board. The bill has been signed to law. They will have resources and funds to pursue all of this. But we are not just talking about illicit movement of firearms now into the country from land borders. We're also talking about the production of illicit firearms in the country by blacksmiths that are sophisticated as much as those ones that you bring in from Europe, America, and Asia. And so it's not just about the paperwork in the treaties from whether UN or ECOWAS. It's about practical things that are actually happening on ground. If I give you, I think in Nigeria now, we have about 6 million or 60 million or thereabout, I'm not too specific now, of small arms and light weapons in the hands of the non-state actors, while you have only about 10% of that in the hands of the state actors. And I'm talking about the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the security agents. So how much effect have we really recorded in terms of the projection of the UN and ECOWAS?
Okay.
Because Nigeria is apparently under ECOWAS.
Of course. Now, the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, mentioned that gender mainstreaming strengthens their strategies and also ensures an inclusive and sustainable approach to security. Now, Darlington, how do you think, or how can the center how will the center be able to integrate gender mainstreaming into its strategies, and what benefits will this approach bring?
Well, I don't know if on their own alone, whether they will be able to achieve that, but all of that has to be spread to the security agencies, and the military. The center is just a center which I don't know how much power the center has. The center, for instance, if firearms are recovered by the police from armed robbers and all of that, they're expected to hand them over to the center. Well, and then recoveries further from terrorists and all of that. But talking about the gender thing now, I don't know how much the center will be able to achieve or enforce.
All right. Now, being that you were a consultant, for the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, I would love to have your opinion on this. I'm talking about a specific game plan that can be employed, to disrupt the links between organized crime groups and terrorist organizations that are exploiting, these small arms networks in Nigeria.
Well, I think the security agencies have to up their games in terms of the use of technology. I think we are still far behind. Our scanners in most times or in most places are not really working very well. The porous border thing has not also helped us, particularly up north, where you have free grazing arrangement and all of that, movement of cattle, animals, and all of that. But I think we need more of the UAVs, the UGVs, and then we also would want to use. Well, electricity has not been working for us very well. So the CCTV cameras and all of that. We also need trackers. They will also need plenty of trackers to track, and then they will also need scanners to scan movement of vehicles well, with force compartments and all of that that are bringing in that are used to ferry in these small arms and light weapons. It's a whole lot of work. And then the manpower, government should be ready to the center to a great extent so that they'll be able to carry out activities. And then lately, under the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, there was the what was called alternative livelihood that was provided for those who were going into crimes to discourage them and reward them, as against what we had under the amnesty program, where monies were given to people who dropped arms and were discouraged to continue. There's hunger in the land. We need lots, the government will need to give employment to most of the youth who are ready tools in the hands of either these
Exactly what I was
dealers.
actually going to ask next, going to the root causes of all this, talking about the socioeconomic drivers of small arms proliferation,
Yeah.
poverty, unrest. Yeah, go ahead. How can they be addressed?
Well, like I was saying, there's so much poverty and hunger in the land in Nigeria for now, and well, we have so many of children roaming the streets in the north, in the west, and so many other places. First, there has to be employment. The universities and schools are churning out graduates on annual basis, and they don't find jobs. Don't forget that terrorists and bandits, they recruit people. Also, they give them employment and they pay them. And so, but if these persons are gainfully employed, or even if they are not given the white collar job, if we can have plenty of vocational training for individuals who will be able to use such vocations to feed their families and cater for their needs, it will also reduce the activities of these bandits and terrorists. And we're talking about employment, we're talking about training, we're talking about the use of technology, and then a lot more. The currency, the Nigerian economy is so bad that anybody is ready, most people are ready to get into crime, to use the bad economy as an excuse, even though the law does not permit that. But I think government on its own, they should think of how to provide alternative livelihood to people, provide jobs, take away street children from the street, give them education and training. If you can't give them formal education, give them vocational training so that they can be useful to themselves and the society. And then one thing the government also need to do is to improve on power. When I mean power, I'm talking about energy, so that the average Nigerian can even do barbing. The average woman can do pedicure and manicure and get themselves simply engaged and then be able to fend for themselves. By all of this, they say the idle mind is the devil's workshop. If we are able to up some of these things, and then I think crime will be reduced. And then people know that the implication of getting into the use of firearms, small arms and light weapons is death. And so most Nigerians love their lives. But some of them who go into all of this, do either go into it deliberately or either out of an act of frustration. All of this, the government should look at, and then the center should start working immediately now that they will have budgets to work on. They will now be able to submit budget to the government, and at the end of the day, they should, by now, I'm sure they are out and are set to carry out their jobs. You talked about destruction of weapons recovered. It's not just like that. They have to be traced first, and then particularly those of them that came from factories outside the country. they have to be traced, and their origins have to be known, and then before they are declared, and it takes a process for the destruction to take place.
Okay.
And then they should begin to think of how to provide alternative livelihood for most of those terrorists and the bandits that are willing to submit their weapons and give up crime.
Okay, but what about the community participation? Because we know that some people in some of these small communities are informants to some of these terrorists. So what about community participation? How should the center engage local communities?
Well, under the Presidential Committee on Small Arms and Light Weapons, PRESCOM, the committee was able to engage traditional rulers where you have them particularly at border towns, and some individuals who were willing to give up information and who were ready to work with the committee. All of them were, aside from being rewarded, were also protected. There's a common saying: you see something, say something. You hear something, you say something. It's not just about communities around the border towns now. You also have all other ones extended to other places who might have information concerning the movement of firearms. I've kept saying that security agents are not, they are not witches and wizards. Neither are they DBS. They rely on information submitted to them or given to them to be able to work effectively, particularly with the use of technology. But they must first have those information. Sometimes I wonder, the last time I talked, some time ago, I talked on another television station where customs in Tinkan Island displayed weapons and drugs. Now, those drugs came from Canada and India. Cannabis came from Canada. And my question was, are we saying that drugs that were not concealed, that were packed into containers in large quantities, moved from Canada, got to Tinkan Port, Tinkan Area Command, and then just the eagle eye of the Tinkan commander and those of them working with him were able to discover that? Now tell me, what happened to the security apparatus in Canada? Canada is a developed country where if you want to talk about technology and all of that, scanners and all of that to detect movement of hard drugs out of their country, moving into another country, that should have been able to be seen. Is it conspiracy? So what should be it? And some of these firearms that leave most of those countries illegally and arrive in Nigeria, even at the seaports, for the land borders, we can understand. Yeah. For seaports, those ones that are concealed, are we saying that the security apparatus of those countries where those firearms were moved by the importers, what was wrong? Why were they unable to discover them and then stop them at that point? But in Nigeria, for instance, on daily basis, you hear how much some of those things that want to leave Nigeria to other countries are discovered and are arrested and are seized and then are displayed to journalists. So what is the problem? Is there some form of corroboration between these countries out there and the importers, or what is the issue? That I have not been able to fathom, to discover what's the issue, what is really wrong with
Darlington, another question that's actually being asked is, in as much as there's so much positivity as regards, the center and the fact that, that the proliferation of small arms will be dealt with, probably once and for all, finally, people are asking, and I am asking you, in your expert's opinion, what are the likely challenges that might be faced? What are the likely challenges that should be anticipated when it comes to this? I know you actually have please go ahead. And also, you talked about how you're asking so many questions, earlier, and sometimes these things actually happen internally. What internal controls should the center employ to prevent arms diversion and also corruption?
So many questions you have asked in one. I wish you could take them one after the other.
All right. Let's begin with the challenges that the center might face. What should they anticipate?
One of the challenges the center might face first is funding. Would the federal government be prepared to fund them adequately? That's question number one, because there's no way they can carry out their professional activities completely without adequate funds. It takes a lot of funds to run that center. That's one. Two, would they get the complete cooperation that they are expected to get, whether from the Nigerian citizenry, not security agents now and the military? Would they get that cooperation? For instance, if they call for the surrender of firearms in exchange for whatever policies they are going to turn out, whether for alternative livelihood or whether for compensation and all of that, would there be total compliance? How would the global phenomenon affect the center now, as particularly in respect of terrorism and the banditry thing that Nigeria is basically suffering from today? So first is funding. If the federal government is ready to give them adequate funding, and then they are able to work, and then they are able to source for international donors, for trainings, for education, and for compensation and all of that, then I think they will be able to go far, because the man heading the center is an experienced person who is ready to work. But if he's ready to work and is not getting monies from other international donors like the UN, the EU, ECOWAS, and other smaller donors, then it becomes a bigger challenge. And then what do you do with those arms that are recovered? What do you do with the persons that are arrested? From whom those arms will be seized?
And that's the reason why, I asked the second question.
Hang on. What do we do to ensuring that some of those arms that are seized, that are recovered, do not go back into circulation? These are some of the bigger problems, because it makes not much sense. And then what would the center do with the local fabricators who have gone so sophisticated to the extent that they could build firearms and small arms and firearms and other ammunition that can compete very well with those of them that are imported into the country from Europe, America, and Asia? What do we do with those persons when arrested?
Yeah, you asked the question of, how do we make sure that the arms that are recovered don't go back into circulation? And that brings me to the second question that I had asked earlier. What about internal controls? What should the center employ to prevent arms diversion and also corruption? Because whether you like it or not, there are bad eggs everywhere.
Well, I think basically some of those questions you are asking are not even for the center. They are for security agents. They are for security agents, the police, and all of that recover this. Let's even understand it and get it straight. The center has limitations in terms of firearms and recovery, in terms of activities. But the police, the DSS, and other security agents like the customs are those who are constitutionally licensed to pursue and recover these firearms from the illicit handlers or dealers. What the center does is, at the times most of these firearms and ammunition are recovered from these illicit dealers and criminals, they are handed over to the center to either destroy or do according to what the UN and the ECOWAS had prescribed. So right. It is not the responsibility of the center to begin to go chasing after people at the border point, for instance, which is the core responsibility of customs, to check the goods that come in and go out, to discover which of them are illicit and which of them are legal. Okay, within the system, it is also the constitutional responsibility of the police, the DSS, and some other agencies like the NIA and co to recover, even the military, to go after these persons and recover these arms and then hand them over to, after profiling, hand them over to the center. So some of these responsibilities are not directly the responsibility of the center.
All right, well, thank you so much for that clarification, Darlington. Now, just before we let you go, you did talk about, training of some of these officers. Can you suggest what training programs or even initiatives will be most effective in enhancing the capacity of Nigeria's law enforcement agencies to be able to investigate, track, and also prosecute, such cases?
There are programs training programs that are run by the UN. There are the EU and ECOWAS. Also, the center is also expected to generate some training programs and then pass on, look for donors, not necessarily the federal government, donors like the EU, the UN, ECOWAS, and all of that. Of course, the funding is what is most important here. And once the funding is gotten from all of this body, all kinds of modern training on the use of technology, the use of modern firearms, modern weapons, the UAVs, the UGVs. I'm sure you know what I mean by the UAVs and the UGVs now.
Yes.
Handling of all of that, particularly, these are areas that have to do with technology, not the direct civil human arrangement. We're talking about how to police and monitor the use of all of this technological advancement that we have abroad. Now, you are aware that you could use a UAV to carry out an attack without losing any human life, but eventually, if that UAV is brought down, you can even have the UGVs on the ground crawling everywhere, gathering intel and reporting back to the control room, somebody manning them, and then with minimal errors. Of course, you remember the error we had some time ago in Kaduna, where the UAV, the images submitted by the UAV was misread, and because in most times bandits occupied that area, it was misunderstood. The images provided by that UAV are sent out by the Nigerian Army that I was not very well read by the person who was manning the UAV. And then when he asked for orders to fire, it was cleared and it fired. It ended up becoming civilians, innocent civilians, law-abiding civilians who were gathered, in one part of Kaduna, carrying out some of their cultural activities. So you need the artificial intelligence actually working with the human intelligence and proper clearance gotten. What do I mean by that? I'll give you an instance. For instance, when that artificial intelligence was submitted by the UAG,
all right, Darlington, sadly,
intelligence to really...
Darlington, sadly, time is not on our side. We really, really apologize, but we'd have to wrap up here. But thank you so much. We appreciate you for your time, and we appreciate you for speaking to us so in-depthly on this particular topic.
My pleasure once again.
Thank you.